So let's say you found a skeleton. How would you tell it's a dinosaur? You personally, how would you decide?
Well, interesting question. I don't know. I'd have to do some research on this.
Hey everybody, welcome to Dapper Reacts number 87, Grayson and the Case of the Missing Human Fossils. I am here for the first time with Grayson. Grayson, how you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great, Dapper. Thanks for having me on.
You are welcome. Well, thank you for reaching out with this video, because this is one that I had looked at a while back, but I wasn't sure if I super wanted to go over it. But you had done a debate not that long ago in which these sort of arguments came up, right?
Yeah, maybe for my perspective, it was quite long ago, but that's because my channel is relatively new. This is like one of the earlier debates that I did on my channel when I first started, back in like almost 2 years ago now, with flood geologist David McQueen. And this is one of my favorite go-to arguments that's just a really easy, quick, simple way to just crumble the entire flood model. It's just asking, hey, where are all the human fossils?
Right.
And then based on the reactions and the responses that I personally have gotten when I have asked creationists this question, this kind of just seems like a very easy kryptonite for their model. They're even the most well-educated and informed creationist, as ironic of a term as that is, they still do not have a good, logical, viable answer to this easy question to ask them. It's just like, ask them one question and see all the steam leave, all the wind exit out of their sails, you know?
Right. So I do want to say a few things. One is that debate is linked in the description, as is Grayson's channel. So if you're not currently subscribed to Grayson's channel, after this, why don't you go click on that and check it out. And if it's something that you like, go subscribe over there. Grayson is doing a lot of anti-pseudoscience stuff over there. So he's got some debates. He's got some standalone stuff. We have a few things to read. Starsong became a member at the Touchpod level. Welcome to the channel membership, Starsong. Thank you very much. And then for $5, Starsong said, for the Benthoven Pizza and Tutu Fund, currently the Tutu Fund is, Tutu Fund is only open during Kent with Bent. However, the Benthoven Pizza Fund is available for every stream. So basically, if we get enough money, I will buy Benthoven to pizza. That is always an option for any live stream. Doesn't matter if he's here or not. But for the tutu, he wants to be here for it if he's going to be forced to wear a tutu. So, Cognitive Trifurcation, who's been a member for 6 months and is at the annual level, says, we'll be at work today, but 3 of my coworkers got COVID, so we're closed for the weekend. Instead, I get to babysit my geriatric dog with a Godzilla emoji. And we'll take a drink for that Godzilla emoji. I'm not sure whether I should say sorry or congratulations to that, because you get a weekend off, but also COVID sucks. So,
But
yeah.
hey, hanging out with old dogs is always a good time. They're so chill and fun.
All right, so what we're looking at today is a talk between, well, it's Robert Carter, and the other guy's name escapes me because I don't see him much, and I think he's only like on this. He's only like the host of this. What's his name?
I've seen him in a few things. I want to say his name is like Joey or something, but I don't recall either. I looked up his credentials at one point and saw that he had like a master's degree in theology or something. Like he's not in any scientific fields to my knowledge.
Okay. Well, in that case, I'm not going to hold him to the same standard I'm going to hold Robert Carter to. Because one of the things I do around here is, you know, the better credential to creationists is, the higher a standard I'm going to have for them for things like accuracy and familiarity with literature and whatnot. Which is why I tend not to, you know, just immediately go after, like, just some guy with a, you know, a camera who goes to church at a creationist church. Like, whatever, man. You're going to get stuff wrong because you haven't studied this. You don't have any formal training. Starsong, who's been a member for 4 months and is at the Touchpod level, says, prune juice is a warrior's drink. Worf said so. That is true. Worf did say that prune juice is a warrior's drink after trying it at 10 Forward, where it was served to him by Guinan, played by Whoopi Goldberg. Yes. They also like to go do target practice together, but Guinan was much better at target practice than Worf was, much to his chagrin. That's also when Worf said that Klingons don't laugh, which is a very obvious lie, which Guinan immediately called him out on, which I appreciate. Just calling Worf out. Look, Worf has a lot of BS when it comes to, like, Klingon stuff. He's always like, oh, Klingons have no fun. They're always serious. Always. Yeah, no. Untrue. So, anyway, we're not really here to talk about Star Trek, though.
Yeah, I'll just... One last thing about Star Trek. I never grew up watching Star Trek, but I actually just started watching Star Trek this year, and I
Nice.
started because my best friend, or one of my best friends, his favorite is Deep Space Nine, and he's always been telling me I need to watch it. So
It's
I just
really
watched
good.
season 1 of Deep Space Nine. I just finished it a couple of weeks ago. So that was my first introduction. I'm on season 2 now, so I'm working my way through Deep Space Nine. I don't know if it's a weird way to start Star Trek off, but that's my
It's
path.
I would normally recommend most people start with like the Next Generation, and also maybe start with like season 3, because seasons 1 and 2 have some rough spots. But look, anywhere you jump into Star Trek is probably going to be okay, with a few exceptions.
I've been really enjoying it. I mean, literally, I mean, Dapper, you probably are well aware of this, but like I was loving the season 1 finale of Deep Space Nine with like the like obvious like creationist versus like teaching evolution in school angle that
Oh
they
yeah.
had for the whole thing. I was like, this is awesome. I wish
Mhm.
I had seen this years ago.
All right, so we are doing the drinking rules, as you guys can see on screen. I'm not going to go over all of them, but do please know that one, you are perfectly welcome to play along without any alcohol or with some other substance. If you want to use a vape pen, if you want to drink water, juice, tea, coffee, whatever you want to do, it's fine. If you do choose to play with a intoxicating substance, please be careful, pace yourself, know your limits. Don't afterwards go out and drive a vehicle, fly an airplane, operate heavy machinery, or text your ex. None of these are good ideas. Roshina T-Rex arms are chicken legs. Keller, who's been a member for 12 months and is at the Touchball level, says Guinan is part local god with an AIG as a bag of dicks emoji. Largely true. In fact, apparently she can also de-age herself, which is a thing she can just do now, apparently. Because Picard is a weird show. Anyway, let's dive into this. So this is from Is this from CMI?
I believe so.
Okay, yeah, this is from CMI. I was going to say ICR, but then I realized the logo was the CMI logo. So for those of you who don't know, CMI, that's Creation Ministries International, used to be Answers in Genesis until there was a big old, like, institutional divorce in which Ken Ham, who used to operate what was Answers in Genesis, like USA or America or something like that, he basically split off to go do his own thing. Somehow he managed to keep the name Answers in Genesis, and then the rest of what was once Answers in Genesis became Creation Ministries International. There were accusations of witchcraft and necrophilia involved, so that's always fun. And as of now, they don't seem to interact very much, but I don't think that there's a whole lot of like animosity. Like I don't see like AIG writing all sorts of hit pieces about CMI, but whatever.
Like this was also confusing to me because normally I associate like CMI with actually having like decent like production quality, but like this, like it looks like they're like filming this in a log cabin. Like I don't know where this is, if this was like some kind of issue with the studio, but like their studio is normally like way nicer than this, and I had to like just double check that it was CMI, and yeah, this has garnered almost like a 500,000 views, which seems like a lot for this type of video. So I'm eager to get into it and expose all the nonsense here.
Nice.
Although, as you will see, Rob Carter is going to be exposing most of this for us. He's going to be doing our jobs for us for at least a lot of this.
Starsong for $5 says Guinan was the only one who ever stood up to Q on his own terms. I would argue that Benjamin Sisko also did that when he punched Q on the face.
Mm-hmm.
Just hit him. Just right at hit him. And then Q's all like, Picard never hit me. And Sisko has to lean in and say, I'm not Picard. Because, yeah, he's not. This is a different character. Get ready. This is a different show.
Even I've seen that one.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's reasonably early in season 1, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right, so let's hear what Dr. Rob Carter and that guy whose name I'm sure we're going to learn soon have to say about why there are no human fossils. And remember, the reason that this is an issue is because, according to most young Earth creationists, the flood killed the vast majority of all humans on Earth and buried them in the same event that caused almost all fossils, at least all Paleozoic and Mesozoic fossils. And according to ICR, at least, many of the Cenozoic fossils, too. And so the question then is, well, how come we don't have any human fossils from that time period? Like, at all. Anywhere. And it's a darn good question. Let's see, a couple more things here. Roshina, T-Rex arms with chicken legs, Keller for $4.99 says, rumors of witchcraft and necrophilia is a standard weekend here. Fair enough. And then Matthew K., who's been a member for 3 months and is at the Tetrapod level, says, much love, my friend, with a live long and prosper, a metal horns, a heart, a much emoji, and a Godzilla. And we'll take a drink for the Godzilla. Thank you very much. All right, here we go. Or maybe I missed the hit play button. Here we
Where
go.
are all the human fossils?
And why don't we see humans buried with dinosaurs today?
If there was a global
Also,
flood,
missing
how
the
come
play
we don't see
button
humans
is it's Dapper's a
buried in
professional.
the
Take a
flood
drink.
sediments. I'm Dr. Robert Carter. I'm sitting here with my good friend, Joel Tay.
Yes, thank you.
Joel
And we're
Tay,
having
there
a
you go.
Really fun
That's his name.
discussion on human fossils, Noah's flood, and questions.
I can say with a name like Joel Tay, really, this guy should be into like some kind of music thing, because that's a musician name. That's not a doing a young Earth creationist podcast name.
It's like a very pretty sounding name.
Yeah, I like it. It's good. Like, hey, did you hear the latest Joel Tay album or something, or like a new Joel Tay single just dropped? Like, come on, man, you're missing your calling here.
I can see Joel Tay being an author, a poet. Like
Yeah,
this
there
guy
you go.
has been doing some great things.
Something artistic. With that name, you got to do something artistic.
That we get asked sometimes after our talks, at our events, sometimes online on Facebook. I'm trying to answer some YouTube videos that CMI produces when people jump on us saying, oh, how come we don't see human fossils in the fossil record? Excellent question.
Hey, you know what? I props to Robert Carter. It is an excellent question. And you know what? While I don't think they're going to do a good job of explaining this, I got to say that even recognizing it as a problem is a step in the right direction for creationists, because a lot of creationists like to just pretend that problems largely don't exist, or that they're just so trivially easy. Like, how many times has Donnie said that he's completely solved the heat problem? The heat problem has absolutely been destroyed. And this is like, at no point has he ever even come close. So you know what? At least Robert Carter is acknowledging, no, this is a real problem, and we probably need to come up with answers for it.
So there's like a few, like basically the way I think about these different creationists is that each one of them has their own different percentage of like their own ability to spin things, or their own proclivity to spin things, or try to use rhetorical tactics to try to cover up for substantive gaps in their position. And some creationists are really bad at rhetoric, and they will actually try to engage in the substance. And this is a horrible question for them. They fail it every time because they'll just say, I don't have a good answer for that. That's a really good question, Grayson. And then the dishonest creationists are the ones that they're not so much trying to have any kind of substantive discussion. They're trying to look good in the debate, and they're trying to win by scoring rhetorical points against you. And those creationists are just going to try to spin things. They're going to try to lie. They're going to try to obfuscate or somehow provide a non-answer that can still sound good to a lay audience. And so I'm actually very happy that I don't think Rob Carter is necessarily, like, at least on that spectrum, he's not too far gone on that. He tries to at least I don't want to say he's like honest, but like he's more honest than I would say the average creationist apologist is. And that's, you know,
that seems reasonable. Yeah, when it comes to creationists, Rob Carter is certainly not at my like bottom of the barrel list. I mean, yeah.
Like, he will at least acknowledge problems, unlike some of these other folks.
Hey, look, there was something that I corrected him on, and while he didn't admit that it was me who corrected him, he put out a video pointing out that the correction had been made and saying that he had been wrong. So, I mean,
that already is like a much higher tier of creationist quality than 90% of the other ones out here.
Yeah, this is also, of course, after over on the CMI website, he mixed me up with a different guy with a similar screen name who also had a YouTube channel, and then also tried to give out that, or actually, no, successfully gave out that guy's real name, which, like, hey, Rob, maybe don't do that.
The Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away, Dapper.
Yeah.
I don't know what else to say.
Although, hey, at least that's not what happened when I was on Evolution News. They didn't try to confuse me with someone else. They did call me deplorable, though, which was fun.
Oh, the deplorable ilk.
Yes. Yeah.
I love that comment.
All right, here we go.
So Rob, I was actually quite excited about this talk after we had the earlier discussion about this.
Yeah, sitting in the photocopier room, hashing out the arguments back and forth, wishing we had a camera then. Okay, we'll see how we'll leave the second time.
Okay, so just to frame the whole thing, all human fossils that we know today, they are post-flood.
Yeah.
So how do we know that?
Actually, I wrote an article a couple of years ago, Are Neanderthals pre-flood? Because someone asked me that. They were convinced that Neanderthal fossils were pre-flood and modern humans are post-flood. But it's not true. Neanderthals are buried in shallow graves. They're buried in caves and rock layers that have been formed by Noah's flood.
So the cave bit is interesting because there's a phenomenon called paleo caves. They're not super common, but they do exist. We know that there have been caves on Earth during like the whole of the geological column. And like, how do you explain that? How does a cave form out of mud underwater during a global flood so that it can be later infilled with sediment, which itself can have fossils. And I don't know how to answer that. I don't think there's a good answer for that.
I'm gonna guess that the answer somehow involves like miracle bubbles in
Oh,
I don't know. Obviously, these bubbles are not working with today's physics, but that would just be your uniformitarian assumption. So these were
obviously.
different physics bubbles. In that's the only thing I can think of that they would even try to say.
Yeah, it's one of those things where like the flood model kind of makes sense if you don't think about it. If you're just like, hey, lots of sedimentary rock, floods make sedimentary rock, therefore one big giant flood can cause a whole lot of sedimentary rock. That explains this, the rock on Earth. Like, oh, okay.
I would also say that it's kind of telling here. Like, let's think about like the question that Rob Carter was asked. He was asked, "How do we know that all human fossils are post-flood?" And in response to that, he just wants to say, "Well, how do we know that Neanderthals were post-flood?" It's like, well, why don't you are these same arguments that you're about to give, Rob? Do they also apply to, let's say, Homo erectus or Homo habilis? Like, I don't think that something tells me that they aren't going to apply to those other species.
They will in a few cases, because we do find some Homo erectus in caves, like famously Peking Man, which was just a Chinese Australopithecus, or sorry, Homo erectus, was found in a cave, not inside a whole bunch of sediment.
Some of them do, but like he's continuing to list out his arguments right here, and the other ones are not going to apply.
We have for $1.99, Roshina T-Rex arms are chicken legs. Keller says God did it. Well, yeah, I mean there's that too. That is going to be the ultimate answer.
Yeah, but it's just such a bad answer too, because if God did it and he just did all these miracles, because the flood needs miracles. You have to miracle away all that heat. If God was willing to just do miracles, then he could have just vanished every single sinful person. He didn't have to wipe out the plants or the animals or any of that. None of that was at issue. He could have just vanished away, poofed away all the problems. So,
and we carry Neanderthal genes, therefore, obviously, humans and Neanderthals live together because they had babies together. So Neanderthals are post-flood.
Okay.
As well.
Actually, the genetic one actually does work pretty well for Neanderthals. I don't think it applies to anything else though, other than Denisovans. But
that's what I'm saying. Is like there's no Homo erectus hybrids. There's no evidence for Homo habilis. Like that argument is what I was saying doesn't work for anything that's not a Neanderthal or Denisovan.
DM Jurassic Park was a documentary wing says, but P. Kingman suspiciously disappeared, Dapper, and therefore is illegitimate somehow. I love it's suspiciously disappeared when what that actually means is like it was loaded onto a train in the vain hope of escaping the destruction of the Japanese invasion of mainland China during the early years of World War II. And then something happened.
Dapper, really quick, because this actually touches on a really important point of what you were talking about earlier and what we were saying with like the more honest, the least honest, or the less honest creationists. A lot of the times when I will ask them, in fact, David McQueen, the first thing out of his mouth when I asked him where are all the human fossils, he said, well, actually, John Mackay, another creationist in Australia, has seen photographs from the 1800s of the British Museum having a display of pre-flood human fossils. And I was like, wait, so are you telling me like that it's a conspiracy, that those fossils are being hidden? Where are those fossils today? And he said, John Mackay went there and he asked the British Museum and they told him that all of the old exhibits are in the basement. And now he's saying that the British Museum is hiding the pre-flood human fossils in the basement.
Wow. Okay. Hey, creationists, this goes for you and all the other conspiracy theorists. If you suggest that the reason that there's not good evidence for your position is because there's a conspiracy which is hiding the evidence, you now have to still provide evidence that you're right. That doesn't remove that burden of proof. But now you also need to provide evidence that there is, in fact, this conspiracy. You've made your job harder, not easier. So, Roshina T-Rex arms are chicken legs. Keller for $4.99 says, God had to unalive all plants and animals to remove the taint of domestication or something. Well, I mean, it didn't work very well because humans apparently just immediately went and domesticated a whole bunch of different animals.
And, well, no, it didn't work at all because Noah put all the domesticated animals on his ark.
Well, to be fair, it says the clean animals. I guess technically they didn't have to be domesticated.
I mean, if you think that the animals that he was putting on the ark, I guess I've never heard a creationist give that take that Noah did not intentionally left behind all the non-domesticated animals.
I mean, I guess it doesn't say he didn't. So we can just, as long as it's not directly contradicted, one of the things I've learned from creationists is you can just make up whatever crap you want about the Bible, as long as it doesn't specifically, explicitly contradict what the Bible says.
Dapper.
It's all good.
Dapper, we are literally about to hear Joey Tay over here literally do that. I mean,
All right,
he's about to say, I won't even spoil it.
Let's hear it then.
Well, as all the other human fossils. Now, the evolutionists say us because humans didn't evolve until late. And, had billions of years of fossil record, and humans are only on the top.
Okay, so we believe that all human fossils are post-flood, yet as biblical creationists, we believe that the vast majority of fossils that we find are actually
flood
caused
fossils
by the flood.
Yeah.
It is curious because one of the things that the creationists love to talk about is how perfect for fossilization the flood would have been, and how that's why we get so many fossils from the flood.
Oh, they're going to talk about that, Dapper. They're
And
going to
yet-
say the exact thing.
And yet it's like, okay, but what about all these post-flood fossils? Because there's still a lot of those. Like, we don't have this vast reduction in the number of fossils. In fact, the higher up you go in the geological column, the more likely you are to find more fossils, because more of that rock simply still exists, because it hasn't been eroded away yet. So it's like their view of how fossilization works and how prominent fossils are is basically the opposite of what actually is real. Like,
It's really amazing, Dapper, that they're literally going to bring up each one of those points. They are going to bring
good.
this up themselves to try to debunk other creationist
Of
explanations
course.
for where the human fossils are. But they're never going to turn those same points against their own beliefs. It's weird how that happens.
well, it happens a lot with creationists, is they will bring up really good points to counter some other creationists' ideas with whom they disagree, but then never bother to apply the same level of critical thinking and reasoning to their own ideas. And so it's like, you listen to people who are doing like the late versus early flood boundary debate, and they both make excellent points as to why the other side's flood boundary doesn't work. And it's like, yeah, the reason they're both able to do that is because they're both wrong, because there's no such thing as a flood boundary.
Oh, they're going to talk about that too, Dapper. You're
Oh,
hitting
good.
it's going to be so funny when they bring up all these points later.
Well, here we go.
So that's a good question, and it raises a controversy, and it raises some discussion points that can be answered. And we're going to try to answer them here because we have a lot of points on our outline to go through. All right.
So first of all, why are most of the fossils that we find, why are they caused by the flood?
Noah's flood is a perfect recipe for fossilization.
That
You have
is-
massive amounts of water
gonna
washing
count that
around,
as a
massive
prediction. I'll
amounts
take
of
a drink.
sediments, things piling up quickly, and things getting buried in sandy, gravelly sort of matrix away from predators, away from oxygen, away from bacteria, and then the minerals in the pore waters of those soon-to-be rocks start to crystallize, and we have fossils forming.
So we need rapid barrier catastrophe. These are the best conditions
Yeah.
for fossils.
So one thing I do want to point out is that none of that actually explains ichnofossils, which are very, very common. So that's things like burrows, footprints, stuff like that. And the flood actually has no realistic option for ichnofossils. If you want to say like body fossils, like the mechanism described would probably get you body fossils. But how you preserve a footprint on a layer of mud under a flood, on top of which another layer of mud is about to get washed, it's just not an option.
Well, it's so baffling because like these fossilized footprints there's an order to them. Like it's like you only get some at the bottom layers, and then you see as you go up layer by layer, the actual types of tracks that are laid down, the footprints that are fossilizing are different. Like it is just so remarkably preclusionary to a global flood.
Yeah.
And like on this point here where they talk about a global flood, that's perfect fossilization conditions. That explains everything that we see. It's like if these people call themselves flood geologists, but yet they don't ever study the geology of actual floods, like
Right.
well-known, universally recognized flood deposits, like deposits from a well-known massive flood. What does that actually look like geologically speaking? And like it doesn't look anything like there's a characteristic geological footprint where it's like, you're gonna have like thick coarse parallel bedded units, you're horizontally like bedded thinner laminated units, ripple and dune cross beds, silt beds. You're gonna have all these hallmark characteristics of actual flood geology that none of these flood geologists know anything about. Like the largest, to my knowledge, the largest example of like a formation, like a geological like layering that's caused by a massive catastrophic flood is in the channeled scablands in the northwest United States.
Well, I would point out that's the largest known one on Earth. Mars has a much bigger floodplain.
True. That's the largest known one on Earth. And I'm like, if you go there and you look at the geology of the scablands, like it
doesn't look like the rest of Earth.
Yeah, exactly. Very clearly from a massive flood. It's characteristic of that. It doesn't look like the rest of the layers that these creationists say are from a flood.
I love the ripple marks that are so big that you can't tell the ripple marks unless you get up into like a helicopter or something.
Yeah.
That's always fun.
There are ways to tell if layers are being deposited by a truly massive catastrophic flood. Like there are characteristics in the rock that the other rocks on Earth don't have, Rob.
Right. We have a few super chats. A Savage Bivalve Alpinist Cobra for $4.99 says, I mean, I've seen them take positions directly contradicted by the text, sometimes by the very next verse. Okay, that is fair. They have also done that.
True.
Roshan, T-Rex arms or chicken legs. Keller for $4.99 also says, wait, the water of the flood was oxygen poor? How did the fishies live? Well, they didn't. That's why they're all buried in the flood layers. There you go. And if you're wondering why they're not all extinct, miracles. They were preserved by God. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. Sounds right.
Yeah. So
And we don't see
Noah's
that.
flood predicts a massive amount of fossils, and creation has been saying that for decades.
Okay, so the flood layers form the fossils, and is that a reason why we find 95% of the fossils that we
Can you
find?
pause it for a second right there, actually? I just want everybody to just remember that quote from Rob for later. He said that the flood model predicts a massive amount of fossils. That's the prediction from the flood. Okay, let's just keep that same energy when we're talking about human fossils later, shall we?
Got it.
Ocean-dwelling creatures.
Oh, actually, more than that, it's mostly clams.
Mostly clams.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think it's mostly clams. I don't know that there's been a survey done. I would agree that shelled organisms are a big thing, but there are multiple places in the fossil record where, like, brachiopods outnumber bivalves. Also, bivalve is probably more accurate than clam, because, there's more bivalves than just clams.
I was gonna have a very generous reading of Rob here and just pretend he said bivalve.
Okay.
But
I mean-
even then, like, I don't even know if that's true. But like, sure, I could just grant like the majority of fossils are marine fossils. I think that's
You want to know why? Most sediment ends up in oceans. That's why. That's literally why. In fact, the flood has trouble explaining that, because the flood should be burying all sorts of terrestrial organisms, and the continents are where we find most of our fossils, because it's not very easy to go on a fossil dig at, like, the bottom of, I don't know, the Gulf of Mexico. Like, what do you... Explain to me your plan for the bottom of the ocean fossil dig. Like, you don't have one, exactly. So yeah, like, of course, oceans are where most of the fossils end up, because where most of the sediment ends up.
Oh, Dapper.
yes.
Dapper. I've heard a creationist before making the argument that when I asked them where all the missing human fossils are, they literally told me at the bottom of the oceans. We can't find them because they're buried at the bottom of the oceans, and we can't actually dig there.
Oh, of course.
Like, they will come up with any excuse.
Utskea for $5 says, but Dapper, look at my PhD. Every professional creationist ever. Yeah, basically, it's like, oh yeah, but do you have a PhD? To which the answer is no, I do not. I do not have a PhD. I have a bachelor's in history, and I have a minor's with that was from medieval and Renaissance studies, which actually, what that really meant was I spent some time learning Old and Middle English. That's literally what that meant.
Yeah, no, that's super cool. I don't have any like graduate degrees, but I am like working on it. But I have an undergrad degree in biochemistry, but I guess I'm not, I'm not qualified as a flood geologist. But again, neither are like any of these guys. They
Yeah.
don't know anything about flood geology.
Actually, was it Alex Markle said that's no clam, which I know is just a joke about Star Wars, but I do want to point out, you actually can tell from this picture that these are clams. For one thing, they have the fluted shell, which is very, very characteristic of clams that have that sort of like corrugated texture. But also you can see that they actually don't have a line of symmetry that goes through the shell, which is the quick way to tell a brachiopod shell from a bivalve shell. Because bivalve shells are left and right, which means that individual shells don't have a line of symmetry, but the two shells themselves are symmetrical when they're put together. Whereas because brachiopod shells are actually top and bottom shells, each shell has a line of symmetry through the middle of it, and there you go. That's you can tell.
Isn't this actually Rob's area of expertise? Is he not like? Does he not have a degree in marine biology?
He does, but it's not like paleontology. So like
Okay.
he should know how
He
to
should
tell
not
the
be-
difference.
He should not be confusing clams with brachiopods.
To be fair, he isn't right now. He's calling these clams, and they are.
But he said that the majority of the fossil record was clams, which like
Well, that
he should not be saying something like that as a marine biologist.
Yeah, he should have at least said bivalves, and he
Yeah.
could have possibly said shelled organisms, which would be more accurate. Because,
Yeah.
I mean, look, it's very easy to go find like Paleozoic rock that's just like crinoids and brachiopod shells, like the whole way down. Crinoid stems and brachiopod shells is like the whole thing. You can find rock where it's hard to see the matrix between the brachiopod and the crinoids.
Yeah.
It's pretty crazy.
Actually, a crinoid stem was the first fossil that I found that was not a shell of some kind.
Nice. In case you guys are wondering, crinoids, they still exist. They're often called sea lilies. They are related to starfish and to sea cucumbers and things like that. They are a kind of... now I can't think of the word. Grayson, help me out here. I'm having a brain trouble. Echinoderm. There you go. That's what I was looking for. Yep. And stems, some crinoids are stalked, which means that they find a place to settle down, and they have this little stem that makes them look like a plant or something with like their tentacles up as fronds. Anyway, those stems are extremely common fossils in certain parts of the fossil record because crinoids have been very, very successful. They're kind of at a low point right now with their diversity and prevalence in the oceans of Earth, but they are very much around, and they also swim in an extremely mesmerizing way. But you know, mesmerization and mesmerizing, that was a guy's name. Guy Mesmer.
Mesmer?
Yeah, Mesmer, that's a name. It's a dude's name.
Like Mesmer from Elden Ring?
No, like Mesmer from history, who came up with his own weird version of like pseudo-medicine back in like the 19th century.
Wow. The
Yeah.
more you know.
There you go.
So only a small percentage.
Yeah,
are
clams and
actually-
snails. Most of the fossil record is shellfish, basically.
Okay.
And then you have
Yeah, I'll
corals
take a
and
drink for that.
sponges
That's
and
fair.
algae, trilobites, things like that.
Wait,
and then some fish.
Wait.
Wouldn't trilobites still be shellfish?
We're supposed to drink when he says something scientifically correct, right? Or is that a
Yeah,
different-
which I did for that one.
I'll take shellfish. I'll take shellfish.
Yeah.
I don't think. I mean, I don't think a trilobite would be a shellfish, would it?
I would. I mean,
it's
when
like
people
that.
say like I have a shellfish allergy, they usually include crustaceans. And while trilobites aren't crustaceans, I mean they're arthropods, and
yeah,
their exoskeletons
but, like,
are
okay,
mineralized.
if you're allergic to like spiders, like you're not gonna say that you know it's a shellfish because like cladistically a spider or like it's an arthropod, but like an insect, if you're allergic to butterflies, cladistically that's a crustacean, right?
Yeah, I mean, technically, I am allergic to mealworms. Whenever I had lizards, and whenever I would feed them, I would have to wear like a mask, and sometimes I would try to wear like gloves so that I wouldn't get the oils that they secrete onto their exoskeleton onto me.
I have never heard of that allergy to mealworms.
Yep. Whenever I would actually touch them or breathe in air that was nearby, my like throat would start to close off a little bit. My nose would get very runny and itchy, and it wasn't like life threatening or anything. It was just very, very annoying. So I guess in that case, I'm allergic to at least some crustaceans. I guess.
Yeah, there you go.
Josh McGee's just gifted 5 Dapper Dinosaur memberships. Thank you so much. We'll take 5 drinks for that. I really do appreciate that. 1. Oh, I'm drinking a mojito, by the way. 2. 3. 4. And 5. Okay. Oh, hey, Crush the Croc Score was gifted membership. He is going to be playing in my upcoming Star Trek Adventures actual play, which will be on Top Hats Off. You will be seeing a commercial for that later.
Nice.
That's because the Bible says that the oceans come out from the sea onto the land.
Because the flood started in the oceans.
Okay.
And since it's a watery event, the things that lived in the water were the first things to die and get buried in massive numbers.
So this is ecological zonation, and I want to point one cool thing out about ecological zonation. Ecological zonation is this idea that basically the ordering of the fossil record is not a temporal ordering, but rather it's essentially an elevation ordering, right? Where we start with deep sea stuff like the Ediacaran or the Ediacaran. I can't figure out how to say it because I hear people say it both ways.
I always say Ediacaran.
Ediacaran? We'll go with that for now.
It just rolled off the tongue. I like saying it that way. I don't know.
That's fair. which a lot of our fossils from the Ediacaran are deep marine. And then a lot of our Cambrian fossils are, in fact, shallow marine. But there's a problem. Stromatolites. Stromatolites happen from... We get fossils of stromatolites from even before our Ediacaran fossils. And they're always shallow water.
Yeah.
Because they're photosynthetic. They can't grow at low depths because they need the sunlight. Which means that right with the very first fossils, because they are our earliest body fossils that we know of, right? The very first fossils completely destroy this entire ecological zonation, and it doesn't work any other time, right? Like, why are whales restricted to the highest layers? Were they in upland whales?
Do they ever think about any of the fact that there are marine deposits in literally every layer, like Cretaceous marine deposits, Cenozoic marine deposits? Like,
that's actually the joke. Savage Cobra's nickname here right now is a joke about this. The bivalve alpinist. It's because of all the bivalves on alpine mountains, right? Like, did the clams run uphill?
Yeah,
what's happening?
Ecological donation. I don't know how that one worked.
Right. Roshna, T-Rex arms or chicken legs, Keller for $4.99 says, if you are allergic to shellfish, there's a high chance you're allergic to other arthropods. I mean, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah, maybe they're secreting similar oils.
I mean, I don't know of any... I don't think I have any known food allergies to any shellfish, like, that people normally eat. So, like, I can eat lobsters, clams, crabs, shrimp, whatever.
But, Dapper, how many other worm species are you able to eat?
I don't know. I mean, I suppose in the course of my entire life, the chances are that I have, in fact, unknowingly consumed a fair few worms. Because, for one thing, worms are very, very small, and they're all over the place. I don't... Look, the only animals to which I am allergic that I know of are cats and mealworms.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that all of the other worm species are still on the menu.
Yeah. Yep. There we go.
So 95% are invertebrates in the ocean. 4.75% is actually from plants.
Okay, so I want to point out, these are numbers that are actually taken, as far as I can tell, the only place I've been able to trace this down to is a chat, not even an official talk or lecture, but a chat that Dwayne Gish had one day at the ICR offices where he was spitballing reasonable sounding numbers, and then these were later compiled into, like, actual numbers that, like, creationists take seriously for some reason. But as far as I can tell, there has never been a study surveying the total fossils. I mean, for one thing, 95% of the fossil record are marine fossils. I mean, if you include, like, biogenic limestone, which is basically just composed of fossils from marine organisms, it should be like 99.9% of all fossils. So, like, I have no idea why they think that this is a point that's important. And also, these numbers are made up.
Yeah.
They're just made up.
That is not, like, a uniquely differentiated line of evidence to support their model.
Like, no one is contesting that most fossils are marine, and no one is predicting that they shouldn't be. Savage Bivalve Alpinist Cobra for $4.99 says, the scallops took up mountain climbing as a hobby. Of course they did. Those darn exercise-getting scallops always climbing up mountains.
That might be a good response back. Do you ever meet creationists that try to bring up the surfing monkeys to you?
Yes.
Yeah. So, and next time I hear about surfing monkeys, I'm bringing up the mountain climbing clams.
Yeah, at least monkeys are physically capable of surfing. I saw it on the news.
Yeah. I mean, we do have examples of creatures, like, floating on, like, rafts of debris.
Yeah, in historical times, too. Like,
it's a known phenomenon.
Like, iguanas are known to have spread from island to island via rafting in the 20th century. Like, not in, like, the medieval period or something. Like, in the 20th century, islands were introduced to green iguanas because they rafted over after a hurricane. Like, this is a thing that just happens. All right, here we go.
And only 0.25% are vertebrates. This is a tiny amount.
0.25% of fossils have a backbone.
I think that is far too high of an estimate, but who cares?
A backbone, that's what it is.
Okay, that's amazing. And some of those are dinosaurs. Some of those are mosasaurs and fish and pterosaurs. And doesn't look like there's hardly any human fossils buried in the fossil record deeply. Now, I know there are people that say, oh, there's this fossil of a giant person buried in this.
bad Photoshop. But you know what? I'm pretty sure Robert Carter is about to say this is exactly what that is. So I'm not going to drink for it. It's fine. I'm sure Robert Carter is not this stupid.
It's layered. We tend to not go there.
Yes.
Most of our stuff says, looking at the fossil record, there really isn't any evidence of giant humans. We just made some people mad. That's fine. But also, there's no evidence of human fossils deep into the fossil record.
Mm-hmm.
That's just the way it is.
And
one
for a
reason-
second right there.
Yeah.
Let's just again keep that in mind that he does said that, because like let's just all keep that in mind, because obviously like I would say almost 50% of the creationists that if you talk about this with a creationist and you ask them where all the missing human fossils is, almost 50% of them are going to give you the conspiracy theories. Like
Yeah.
the amount of times that I've heard of them covering up giant human Nephilim fossils, or the pre-flood human fossils being hidden by the museums and NASA, whoever's doing this, like at least half of CMI's audience thinks these things.
My favorite creationist conspiracy theory about fossils was I actually first heard about this from Cindy Lincoln, who was
Nice.
from a video of her giving the tour of the science center at Dinosaur Adventureland. And there was this dentist.
By the way,
Yeah. There was
I have taken that tour myself.
interesting.
It was an experience.
I bet it was. Of all of the experiences, that was one of them. But the theory goes like this. There's this dentist, and whose name I can't remember, but if you go back over my like Helping Cindy Lincoln series, she says it. But he claims that he traveled around to different museums in Europe, noticing that all of the various ape-man skulls were arranged in anatomically implausible ways to make them look more like apes or something.
Okay.
And that after he started confronting the museum curators about this, he was followed around by assassins who were trying to kill him as he was running around Europe. Because as we all know, natural history museums have an assassin budget. That's just a thing that's right there in the budget. There's a line item for assassins.
They called in the intergovernmental task force that suppresses creationist the intergovernmental task force for suppressing Christianity and
Right.
for spreading the lies of evolution.
Right. They have well-known assassins. I mean,
Every museum has that task force on speed
Yeah.
dial. For
he was
assassination.
basically being chased around Europe by John Wick. Is basically what I'm trying to get to. Yeah.
Oh man,
It's-
I wish we had John Wick on our side, honestly.
I feel like having the science on our side is probably good enough. I don't think we need an international assassin.
Yeah, but if you have science and John Wick, I mean,
Fair point. Fair point.
That's really hard to get fossils today.
Yeah, because the flood's over. You don't have this massive episode of sedimentary deposition happening anywhere. And so fossil formation happening today is rare.
Well, I mean, fossil formation is just generally rare, period.
Yeah.
But like we know of places where fossils are forming. One of my favorite things to point out is the existence of what are called subfossils, which are the remains of organisms that are partially permineralized.
yeah.
And if we have those, which means that they're all fairly recent, right? Because they're all in that sort of 10,000-ish year range. And they're subfossils, which means they're currently undergoing the process of permineralization. That means that we do have fossils forming, and those are some fossils that we interrupted from forming right there. Like, in process. The very fact that a subfossil is a thing that exists is a pretty strong indication that fossilization is going on right now. We know of places where fossils are forming right now.
And you already brought up the excellent point earlier, where if you do put a flood boundary somewhere in the fossil record, like a lot of creationists, sometimes they put it at, the extinction event of the dinosaurs, sometimes they put it at the Cenozoic, wherever they put it, if you've got a flood boundary, you still have fossils above that boundary at like no greater or lesser rate than below that boundary.
Right,
Like-
yeah. Everything just continues on as if
Yeah, like-
geology didn't change drastically at that point.
We've got a lot of Pleistocene fossils. I don't know if Rob's just not aware of
Oh, yeah.
this.
Actually, around in the area where I live, most of the fossils are various like later Cenozoic, so like Eocene and
here.
whatnot.
I don't know if you've heard this yet, Dapper, but there's a guy at CMI that's got a new idea about where to put the boundary for the flood, and Rob Carter says that guy has changed his mind and a lot of minds at CMI, and his solution It's unique. I'll let you know that.
Well, I've heard people argue for everything from like Permian to like Miocene as like where the boundary
I'll
is.
spoil it a little bit for you. It doesn't exist. That's his
Oh,
take.
oh,
His
okay.
take is that the flood boundary has already been eroded. So it's
Sure.
above the Pleistocene.
Oh no, Savage
And it's
bivalve.
already been eroded. It's gone already.
Well, in that case, we do have some flood fossils of humans, but okay. Savage bivalve alpinist cobra for $19.99 says the Smithsonian sixth the Museum Assassins Guild on anyone who calls them out for hiding the giants that actually made the mounds they claim the Native Americans made. Everyone knows only white folk can pile dirt on dirt. I do hate the conspiracy theory that like giants had to have made these dirt mounds in North America, because it's just racism. It's like, how could Native Americans figure out how to put dirt on top of more dirt? Like, I don't know, because that's a pretty basic thing to do. Like, anyone could figure out how to put dirt on top of dirt. And like, no, had to be either giants or aliens or secret white people. It's like, no, it doesn't have to be any of those things. These people aren't stupid, or weren't stupid, since I guess the mound builders are dead now.
If only we had the archaeological remains from the Native American mound builder societies that would have shown on their bones that they spent a lot of their lives lifting heavy weights like dirt and moving them back and forth. If only we had that.
At the risk of getting political, hey, United States government, stop allowing the Smithsonian to be exempt from the rule that says that human remains of native cultures actually should be repatriated to people who are native to the area that those remains were found in. Because the fact that you get to still treat them as artifacts rather than human remains, that's not okay. And I get that fairly recently in terms of like the history of archaeology, it is true that the United States passed a federal law which reclassified Native American remains from being artifacts to being human remains, which it's a little crazy that at one point in time we were like, yeah, these human remains, they're not human remains, they're artifacts. You can just grab them, put them in a museum. Wow. Like, but progress was made, but yeah, the Smithsonian does not deserve an exemption to this. And look, it's not like you can't negotiate with various groups of, like, say, Native Americans and say, hey, could we have a display? Maybe those people could come and consult on the displays. Things like that. I don't know. Just saying, cut it out, Smithsonian. Stop hoarding human remains from other cultures. Just don't do it.
100%.
Okay, but the Bible is clear that God created dinosaurs on day 6, land creatures, together with man.
That's what I was pointing at.
I'm going to take a drink, for the Bible is clear about this.
That's what I was talking about earlier, Dapper, where you were like saying that, they're just taking Bible verses and saying it says stuff. It's like, yeah, the Bible's pretty clear that dinosaurs were created on day 6. It says that clearly.
Actually, it mentioned the only place that the Bible mentions dinosaurs in Genesis 1 is when it talks about the birds of the air being created on day 5.
Yes.
So
okay, and wait, Rob Carter, like, I like Rob because he will actually correct his co-host on this. That's kind of rare for a creationist to do.
Yeah, that's fair. Alex Markle says, can we make duplicates of them for display purposes? I'm assuming he means like the human remains. I think that is something that should be left up to representatives of the groups to whom the remains should be repatriated. Like, if you had, like, I don't know, my grandfather's skull and you wanted to put it on display in a museum, and I was like, nah, I want that to be, interred as my ancestor or something, I feel like you should have to get my permission if you want to then cast the skull and leave the skull cast on display. Now, me personally, I'd probably say, yeah, sure. If you really want to take a cast of the skull, okay, fine. But it should be something that is left up to the people who should have control over the remains in the first place. So I'm okay with them deciding that it's fine to have a cast made, right? But that's a decision for them. It shouldn't be a decision for the Smithsonian, and it shouldn't be a decision for me. Now, if they ask me what my preference would be, I'd say, yeah, I think a cast or allowing the museum to display could be a great educational opportunity. And so you should consider allowing them to, but the decision should be with you, right? And if they decide something that wouldn't be my preference, I don't think I get to have a say in that. So that's, if you're asking me what my personal preference would be, okay, I have those, but it doesn't really matter because it shouldn't be a decision that I have a say in.
The Bible says he created land animals together with man.
So that would include dinosaurs.
It would include dinosaurs now that we know that dinosaurs exist.
And yet we know that in the fossil record,
Except that, okay, this is something that really bugs me about the land animals versus animals of the air and sea. The creationists, like, they seem to think that that has some kind of taxonomic meaning. The thing is, it really doesn't, right? Like, if you say, well, dinosaurs are land animals, I can say, okay, well, what about the ones that aren't, right? Like, pigeons are dinosaurs, they're not land animals. Or you could say birds are animals of the air. I'm like, well, what about, like, rheas and cassowaries and ostriches and kakapos and all these other flightless birds? Are they land animals? Were they made on day 6?
Yeah, it's just weird that, like, God made all of the land mammals and then was like, hey, wait a minute, actually, I forgot some mammals. Let me go back and add the ones that were.
Right.
I was going to add those to the mammal patch, but slipped my mind.
Right. And so whenever creationists actually use this as an argument for why birds aren't dinosaurs. It's like, well, dinosaurs were made on day 6, but birds were made on day 5. And to which I just respond, well, what about mammals? Because mammals are mostly land animals that were made on day 6. But I feel like whales would have been made on day 5, right? So
he made mammals in 3 different batches, right?
Right.
He made one batch with the land animals, one batch of mammals with the birds, because bats are birds, of course, and then one batch with the sea animals, like because whales and dolphins.
Right. And so the point that I always try to make with that is, like, even in terms of the text, the distinction of which day something is being made on is not a strictly taxonomic distinction. It is a habitat distinction. Essentially, God is creating habitats and then filling them with the animals that should be in those habitats without any particular regard, as far as I can tell, to any kind of taxonomy. Which means that if you're trying to use the day of creation as a taxonomic argument, you're fundamentally misunderstanding both the Bible and taxonomy. Which, I mean, I feel like you should get one of those right. Roshna, T-Rex arms or chicken legs Keller for $4.99 says they seem like the type of people who would only trust 2 sources. 1, Glenn Beck, and 2, talking woodland creatures. I would recommend trusting neither of these sources. But hey, what do I know? Although I guess I do know that Glenn Beck was fired from Fox News for being, in part, a little bit unreliable, but, you know.
And the few times in my life where I have taken the advice of creatures have turned out very poorly for me, so.
Yeah. I mean, they probably don't have your best interest at heart. So.
No. I had to learn that the hard way, too.
Oh, very unfortunate.
Dinosaurs and men are not found
Yeah, they're not.
together. Why is that?
Well, except for the birds, but we'll let it go. I'm going to let it go.
Well, how many different reasons can we think of?
Well, quite a
Okay,
few.
wait,
I think
pause.
first of all, we have what we call living fossils, right?
Yeah.
How is this? What?
I just love, like, 0.5 seconds into Rob Carr's answer to that question. Like, he said, very clear question. Why aren't human fossils found with dinosaurs? And Rob's answer was that, let's see how many different answers that we can just think of for that. Let's just spitball how many we can come up with, because we don't know. It's like,
And also, the first answer to this isn't even anything that could logically be a problem for this. Like,
yeah, living fossils, yeah.
What? Savage Bipedal Alpinist Cobra for $1.99 says, which day were semi-aquatic animals made on? I'm gonna have to say that they were made stretching across from just before sunset to just after sunset on that sunset between days 5 and 6, because, as of course we all know, the day starts at sunset in terms of, like, Bible times, as well as both Jewish and traditional Christian liturgical days. Which is why, on December 24th at sunset, it becomes Christmas.
Dapper, just really quick, I have a question to ask you about this video. How many seconds do you think it will be before somebody brings up the coelacanth from here?
From here?
Yeah.
Probably not more than 5. I'm gonna go under 5.
Yeah, you're probably right.
All right, here we go. Let's find out. We're at 57 seconds right now.
So what are living fossils? These are creatures that we find in the fossil record. And
And they're
for
alive today.
example- they're still alive today. But we
No,
only find
more.
certain, what we call time frames in using evolutionary time.
Yeah, so horseshoe crabs.
Horseshoe crabs is a good
Yeah, they're
example.
all over the bay where I grew up. I saw horseshoe crabs all the time, and they're in the fossil record in some of the deeper layers of the fossil record. Buried with trilobites. Trilobites are now extinct. But it's something like the coelacanth.
Oh,
What was it
okay,
like?
so that was like 15, 16 seconds, right?
Okay. So one thing I want to point out is that
Trilobites are not living fossils, are they?
trilobites are, they can't be living fossils because they're extinct. So we're going to take a drink for Rob Carter apparently thinking that maybe trilobites are still alive, except he doesn't. I don't know. It's very confusing.
But yeah, 15 seconds. Actually pretty impressive self-restraint there.
Yeah. Now, when it comes to horseshoe crabs, one of the things I want to point out is that horseshoe crabs don't actually stay the same throughout the fossil record. Our earliest Xiphosuran... Yeah, well, we're going to talk about that too. So our earliest Xiphosurans have significant differences. Now, they might not be the kind of difference that the average person is going to notice as someone who doesn't study things like arthropod anatomy, but they're actually very significant. So, for instance, Xiphosurans or horseshoe crabs are divided into 3 very distinct segments: cephalon, a series of fused abdominal segments, and a telson. But our earliest Xiphosurans don't actually have the fusion between the various abdominal segments. Instead, they have free, movable segments there. They also have differences in how prominent that telson is. They have differences in how specialized their limbs are, although Xiphosurans in general are known for very low amounts of limb specialization, so that doesn't help a whole lot. But there is very obvious and very evident Xiphosuran evolution in the fossil record. It is not simply that horseshoe crabs appear more or less identical to how they are now, and then they persist that way. They do not. We have basal Xiphosurans who are missing many of the aspects of modern Xiphosaura or modern Limulidae. I can't talk right now. Anyway, it's the family to which modern...
I think that your same basic argument applies to just about every example I've ever seen of a creationist bringing up a living fossil.
Right.
Like the coelacanth, you can bring out like anatomical differences between fossil coelacanth and modern day coelacanth. You could do the same thing with pretty much everything I've ever seen a creationist list as an example of.
In fact, the entire genus to which all modern coelacanths belong is Latimeria, and there are no fossil Latimerians, or, members of Latimeria that we know of. Latimeridae does seem to start off in the Cretaceous, but it starts out with much larger freshwater-only Latimerids, which are still significantly different from our deep-water modern coelacanths. We've got a couple things. Savage 5 Alpinist Cobra gifted 5 Dapper Dinosaur memberships. Thank you so much. And also Liz D for $5 says, there are no fossils, only carvings made by Noah and his family out of boredom and then tossed overboard, and AIG is a bag of Cantovans. Yeah, I like that. Noah has plenty of free time to just have like a little fossil workshop where he carves out extremely intricate details of fossil animals that just never existed. And it's just like, oh, well, that one's done, off the side of the ship. But we have 5 drinks.
Free time in between when they were taking care of all of the animals on Earth.
I've actually done mathematical calculations on like roughly how long it would take just to muck out the elephant stalls, and it's like a full-time job. It's ridiculous. So first we're gonna take the 5 drinks. I'm gonna talk about the Ark Encounter Zoo staff. Then we're gonna take a quick break, and then we'll be back. So here's 5 drinks. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Roshan, a T-Rex arms for chicken legs color for $4.99 says, Kent Hovind also thinks trilobites and non-avian dinosaurs are still alive because coelacanths are still alive. Kent Hovind has actually repeatedly indicated that isopods are surviving trilobites.
Yep. He's done it to me when I was debating Kent Hovind. He told me that I think it was a type of brine shrimp. He told me was a.
Oh goodness, I think that's worse than an isopod.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right. So, we got the drinks and the super chats, and then we were going to talk about what we're going to talk about. Oh my goodness.
I thought we were going on a break.
No, there was a thing I wanted to mention. Oh, the zoo staff. Right. The Ark Encounter has a few hundred animals at their various zoo-like attractions that they keep track of. So they have lemurs. They've got various equids that they, I think, keep together. Like they've got zebras, horses, donkeys, as well as hybrids, all just kind of in an enclosure. They have some North American camelids. They have various like ruminants that they just have both domesticated and some wild varieties. But they have a zookeeping staff, which it does fluctuate in size, but it's usually somewhere around like 20 to 40.
So noticeably more than 8.
Way more than 8, and also caring for far fewer animals than their estimate for how many animals are on the Ark.
All right.
Now, you could argue, well, maybe that's because they need to have like shifts going, right? And okay, you know what? Fair enough. Maybe you do need round-the-clock animal care for these, and so you need like 3 or 4 shifts worth of people, right?
It's because Noah didn't have to deal with OSHA.
Well, yeah, there's obviously. But yeah, it's just one of those things where it's always amusing to me the vastly different ratio of animals to caretakers that AIG actually needs to keep these animals actually alive in real life versus the number that they say they need to keep all of the animals alive, unlike that have ever existed, basically, or at least that are terrestrial tetrapods.
Yeah, I'd love to see the proof of that.
Yeah, it's always very curious. But hey,
actually, I would not love to see the proof of that because it would probably involve a lot of animal casualties if they tried it.
Well, yeah, there is that. It would be. It's one of those experiments where it's probably unethical to actually do, but it would be interesting to see the results. With that being said, we are going to go take a quick break, and when we come back, we will continue on with the video. In the meantime, though, please enjoy a quick commercial for my upcoming show over on Top Hats Off. So, we'll be right back. Tune in on September 20th, 2024 for a new adventure. It's been a year since the M5 incident, and the Lexington is ready to explore the galaxy once again. Join Captain Hawk, Commander Chanos, Executive Officer, Chief Medical Officer Tragan, Science Officer Lanford, Ship's Counselor Ross, Chief Engineer Shelby, a half-Tellarite with cybernetic implants, and Security Officer Croc.
Captain's Log, Stardate 5340.6. The Lexington is finally done with her repairs after the M5 affair. I know it was an honest mistake, but it's hard to believe that the great Dr. Richard Daystrom's legacy may end up being the near destruction of what is now my new ship. I have a new crew, one in line with Starfleet's new philosophy of moving away from mostly single-species crews and to a more integrated crew of multiple species. I'm not looking forward to the challenges of the life support, though. Too hot for some, too cold for others, too humid, too dry, to say nothing of the atmospheric combinations of gas being suboptimal for half the crew. That being said, we leave Starbase 4 ready for what's out there, for what lies beyond the edge of known space. The Lexington is a fine ship, with a fine crew, one of the best in the fleet, despite their experimental makeup. I could not be more proud to be their captain. This 5-year mission into the unknown is one we've prepared for our entire lives, and I'll be honest, it promises to be a fine adventure.
Their mission is to investigate a distress signal from the past. With spatial anomalies, a potential infiltrator, and a bloodthirsty crew will throw them all into danger. Begin an all-new adventure on the Top Hats Off channel with Star Trek Lexington, the Star Trek Adventures First Edition actual play series. Welcome back. Thank you for sticking with us. Those of you who did, welcome back, Grayson.
Yep.
So,
it's so good to be here.
Yes.
I refilled my drink, so I'm ready for whatever Rob Carter has to throw at us.
Awesome. Oh, and I forgot, Liz D's most recent super chat was in fact their 20th super chat on the channel here, so thank you very much for 20 super chats. That is very, very generous. Before we get right back into Rob Carter, there's a few things. One is that commercial that you saw for Star Trek Lexington. That is an actual play. It will be on Top Hats Off. If you look in the description to this video, you will in fact find a link that will take you to the watch page for Episode 1, A World with a Bluer Sun. That is featuring me as the GM. We've got Chesh, who's a channel regular, as Dr. Tragan, the Chief Medical Officer. We've got FTFE, or Craig, from the FTFE channel, as Lieutenant Commander Taryn Shelby, the Chief Engineer. We've got Jordan from Reason to Doubt as Captain Ethan Hawke. We've also got Zerolon, who's a regular channel supporter, who's playing Commander Chanos, the first officer. We've got Crusher, who is playing, Lieutenant Commander Croc, I believe, the chief security officer. We've got, I said Tiri Rana, sorry. Tiri Rana is playing the XO, not Zerolon. Zerolon is instead playing Hank Lanford, the science officer. And we have Zarna Rankar, who is playing our ship's counselor. So, if that is something that interests you, that will be over on Top Hats Off on the 20th at 5 p.m. Pacific, which is 8 p.m. Eastern. So please check that out. Also, the channel is, of course, supported almost entirely by people who, just like you, are just watching this and enjoying what they see. So if you want to join the Patreon or the channel memberships, that's always going to be great. It gives you access to the Discord server. It's just for my supporters. Early access to months and months worth of Dapper Dinosaur content. You could binge for an entire day, and I don't know that you would actually run out of early access content. And by an entire day, I mean, like, you could start at midnight and finish at midnight, and I'm not sure that you would be out of Dapper Dinosaur content. It is unreleased as of now. There's also
Patreon your benefits are much better than most other channels I'm aware of. That sounds like you're getting a lot from that.
Yeah, and it starts at only $1 a month on Patreon, or $1.99 for the memberships. There's also a merch store right below this. As you can see, a merch shelf. There's also an Amazon wish list. Basically, the Amazon wish list is just a way to make the happy brain chemicals go for like about a day or so, and a little bit more depending on how much I like whatever it is that you get me. So if you really, really, really want to make sure I have a great day, just get the. Oh, Crusher, you're the counselor. Okay, sorry. So I mixed up who's the counselor and who's the security officer. So I guess.
Did I hear correctly that the captain of your crew is Ethan Hawke? Is that what I heard?
No, it's not Ethan Hawke. I'm sorry. It's Edward Hawke.
Edward Hawke. Okay.
I might have said Ethan.
I mean, I'm Grayson Hawke.
Yes.
Edward Hawke. I don't know if canonically in universe lore we are related, but that's my headcanon.
Look, talk to Jordan and see if you can become Captain Edward Hawke's like great grandfather or something. I don't know.
I would love for that to be actually part of it. Like for clarification, Hawke is my actual middle name. It's not just like I made up a channel name. Like my dad is a falconer, and we've had a hawk, like a Harris hawk, basically my entire childhood. And my dad's just obsessed with falcons and hawks, and so he wanted to name my first name Greyhawk. And my mom was like, hell no. And so they compromised, and my name is Grayson Hawke, and then my last name.
Got it.
So maybe I'll talk to Jordan, and I will see if I can get worked into the backstory of your crew's captain.
Good luck. I think it's probably quite possible. In fact, actually, Jordan's voice is the one who was reading that captain's log that was in that commercial. So
nice.
Yeah, please do check that out, everyone, if that's something that interests you. I was actually just speaking to Craig just the other day. We were going over like rules and stuff, and he was telling me that he is very anxious to get this going. He is really looking forward to it because he's a big Star Trek nerd. So, anyway, here we go. Here's Rob Carter, unless you got anything to add before we go back to Rob Carter. I'll take that as a no. Here we go.
Yes.
An amazing fish that they thought was the primitive four-legged animal. You know, those stumpy legs were the.
No one has ever thought that coelacanths were primitive four-legged animals. I'm just going to take a drink.
I think that deserves it because I heard that. I'm just like, wait, Rob, what? Like,
in fact,
what are you referring to?
Coelacanths are the group of lobe-finned fish that are least closely related to tetrapods.
Is he just saying that because they're lobe-finned fish that people were trying to say that these were the transitional species or something? Or
I think so.
Because in a technical sense, like you could say that they have transitional anatomy, but
yeah, they do.
Between non-lobe-finned fish and like more derived tetrapods, their anatomy is transitional. So technically, they could be considered a transitional form. But it's like I've never heard anyone like from the 1800s or something saying like, we found the missing link. It's coelacanth.
Yeah, and plus most of the coelacanths we know are from way after the evolution of tetrapods, and they have also themselves evolved in a very different direction to the direction in which coelacanths lived. So it kind of feels like saying like, oh hey, look, this particular stegosaurus is actually transitional between ankylosaurs and Scutellosaurus or something. It's like, well, in some weird ways you could say that, but it doesn't actually make any sense, really, because they're not, and they're a separate path that evolution took after the split.
I mean, like, oftentimes you can have transitional forms that are like sister clades of the actual like theorized ancestor.
Yeah.
But like they're closely related sister clades. Like you could just try to push that to an absurd level and like try to make a case that there's transitional anatomy present. But like to the broader point, at this point, you know, I've been debating creationists for over 2 years now, basically. And at this point, I just tend to ignore or just be. I try to prep myself that anything that they're going to say regarding transitional fossils, they're just not going to understand what those words mean.
Right.
Like, I've never in my life encountered a creationist that could actually tell me what a transitional fossil is correctly.
Yeah. Saying that this is a transitional form is kind of like saying whales are a transitional form between hippos and camels. Like, no, not really. Not really. All right, here we go.
Evidence of the thing evolving into a land animal.
Yes.
In the evolutionary record, I mean, it's got a couple 100 million years of fossil representation.
Yeah.
And then it died out.
Yeah, almost all of which is Mesozoic, Rob.
Yeah.
Mesozoic. When do you think science says the transition between tetrapods and their aquatic ancestors occurred? Because I'll give you a hint. It wasn't the goddamn Mesozoic, Rob. I'm going to take another drink there because, like, he has to know better, right? Like, you can't tell me Robert Carter doesn't know that the vast majority of coelacanth fossil diversity is Mesozoic.
Like he's saying, well, where's the transitional fossil between the coelacanth and land animals? It's like, why do you think there should be one, Rob?
Right, yeah, like, there are transitional fossils between basostegocephalian ripidistions, but that's not coelacanths. So, like, I don't know what to tell you, man.
The dinosaurs.
Yes, that's right.
And then they find it alive off of Madagascar. Now they find some in Indonesia also. And it's nothing like a transitional fossil.
Yep, but it was never supposed to be. I'm taking another drink. I can't stand this. This thing that no one really ever thought of as transitional isn't transitional. Yeah, okay, Rob.
I would like for somebody to find, like, any primary source document from any period of time where an actual scientist is as a transitional fossil. Like, I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but like, I genuinely would like to see that if it does exist.
Yeah, I'm unaware of any such source. I mean, the closest I can come and say, well, they're lobe-fin fish, which puts them closer to tetrapods than it does to any other fish that aren't lobe-fin fish.
Yeah.
Which is true. I mean, they're definitely closer to being tetrapods than, say, your average carp is. Or any carp.
One of my favorite questions actually to ask creationists is, like, especially whenever they bring up the whole idea of like, well, the reasons why humans are so genetically similar to because they have similar design, and like the whole like similar design equals similar genetics argument. I love bringing up like lobe-finned fishes to there because I'm like, you know, what do you think is more genetically similar? Like a lobe-finned fish and a human, or a lobe-finned fish and a like a goldfish?
Right. And normally they would say it's going to be the two fish, but it's not.
Yeah, it's not. The lobe-finned fish is far more similar to a human and all other tetrapods than it is to any non-lobe-finned fish because of phylogenetics.
Mm-hmm. Yep. All right, here we go.
And it's just like the fossil representation. It hasn't changed.
Nope, that is an absolute lie. There are no members of the genus Latimeria that are found in the fossil record, and even the other members of Latimeridae, which we do find in the Cretaceous, are significantly different. They do not look the same. They are not the same. But yeah, I'm taking a drink for that. That's just... Yep. Okay, Rob. I know you watch my channel occasionally. If you watch this, I want you to cite me a paper in which a coelacanth that is found in the fossil record that is morphologically similar enough to modern Latimeria that it would be reasonable to place it in that genus. That doesn't have to be the conclusion of the paper, but I just want you to tell me which paper you think it is that is describing a latimeriid coelacanth that is similar enough to modern latimeria that it would belong in that genus. That's my request for you.
Should be very easy, Rob. I expect that he'll have that to you by the end of the week.
Well, first of all, I don't think he's actually going to watch this particular video because it doesn't have his name in it. But yeah, I don't expect that at all, actually. Although, with Rob, it's at least possible that I will get some kind of response, because Rob has responded to me in the past directly. So, now, of course, he didn't name me in that response, which was... it felt a little impolite, Rob, I'll be honest with you. But it's okay. It's okay, because I did point out that it was me in the comments, and you agreed with me in your comments, and so I appreciate that. And I know I haven't always been super nice to you, Rob. But to be fair, you did start out by trying to confuse me with someone else, and then trying to give out what you thought was my real name, which isn't actually fully public. My first name is, but you gave a first and last name, which wasn't, as well as giving more information about, like, biographical details, which for me wouldn't be public, but which were for some other guy. So, like, me and Rob have I've got sort of a complex relationship. It's not ideal. It's not the worst, but it's, I mean, look, I like Rob a whole lot more than Gunter Beckley.
Yeah.
So, you know.
I think we can all agree on that one.
DM Wing says, put his name in the title. Look, if we do a sequel to this, which we very well may, I'll probably put his name in it.
Should probably be like debunking the Rob's attempt at a solution to the...
There you go.
Yes.
All right, yeah, Rob
And
tried to
yet we
explain
never found it.
that he would definitely get his attention with that.
It's probably true. Yeah, maybe I should. Remind me if we do a sequel to, like, come up with or just give me one of those.
I don't think that Rob actually even goes to even attempt to try to offer his own solution until the second half of this video. The whole first half is like, it's so much fun because it's just them debunking other creationists.
Yeah.
And like saying, this explanation fails, that explanation fails, that one doesn't make any sense.
Buried with whales,
Yes, right.
and they live in the same ocean.
Yes.
So
Rob, there are no marine coelacanths from the fossil record.
Yeah, fresh water.
They're freshwater. They don't live in the same place, Rob.
It's just like, he's going to kill us. Like every
Oh
2
my
seconds
goodness.
he said something wrong.
I'm taking a drink for that one.
Yeah.
The deep water... First of all, also, modern coelacanths are all deep water fish. We have virtually no fossil-bearing strata from deep marine sediment. You know why? That stuff doesn't last long. It gets subducted. There's a reason why
They also mentioned subduction as one potential answer for where the human fossils went.
Yeah. Vandali 1998 for $2 says, was Rob the guy that doxed the wrong Dapper? Kind of. So, the stuff that he gave out about the other Dapper was not a dox, because that stuff was publicly available, and that guy was okay with that stuff being known. However, if he had given that amount of information out about me, that would not have included stuff that's all publicly known, which is not great.
So
I'm
he
not
intended to dox you, but just was unable to.
Well, I can't prove that, right? Because it could be that he wouldn't, if he had gotten the right Dapper, that he wouldn't have tried to find any information that wasn't public.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
so I can't say for certain that that's what happened. However, it still is the case that if that amount of information had come out about me, it definitely would have been releasing information about me that is not public without my permission. Which, it feels scummy, but I can't say it's technically a doxing attempt in the strictest sense. So, you know. And I also do think it was an honest mistake. I don't think Rob Carter intentionally mixed me up with some other guy who does coding tutorials.
Yeah.
I don't see that doesn't seem right. Savage Bivalve Alpinist Cobra for $5 says, Rob, find us a 5-meter Mousonia and then we'll talk. Ooh, Mousonia, that's a good one. Coelacanth. Oops, I almost made a mistake here that I would have had to drink for. But instead, I didn't. All right, here we go.
So the entire evolutionary history of whales, coelacanths were right there, and we never find whales and coelacanths buried together.
Rob, I want you to find, why do you say that? What is your evidence for this statement, right? Because we know it's not physical evidence. We don't have any such physical evidence. So what is the theoretical framework that allows you to say that you think that whales and coelacanths live together for the entirety of the fossil record of whales? I want to know, right? And do you find whale fossils in the deep marine sediments that we would expect to find the fossil ancestors of modern Latimeria in? Because the answer is basically no. All of our whale fossils are primarily from shallow water marine environments, often from inland seas. Because again, deep sea sediment doesn't stick around long enough for us to usually find much of it. The only reason that we actually have any of it at all is because of various unusual geological circumstances.
I was gonna say, like, the majority of really, really like high quality whale specimens, like ancient whale specimens that I'm aware of, are from like Egypt and North Africa, and like, like, just because those areas used to be covered and now they're not, and now they're desert. Go in them and find those fossils. You don't have to go to the bottom of the ocean.
But they're also not where we would expect modern Latimeria to be found.
Yeah.
Because
you would not expect to find right where those whale fossils are.
Fundamentally, modern coelacanths and the fossil whales don't live in the same place, because it turns out the ocean isn't one place.
Yeah, I think that's really is what Rob is thinking here, is that, hey, wait a minute, whales live in the ocean, coelacanths live in the ocean, so they're living in the same environment.
Right.
They're living right next to each other.
That's about as silly as saying, hey, this person lives in New York City, and so does this other person, and so they live in the same place. But what you realize is, like, one of them lives in, like, uptown Manhattan, and the other one lives in, like, a hovel in the Bronx. It's like, you're not living in the same place.
I just need to point out here, this is a marine biologist.
Right, he knows the ocean isn't one place.
Right? Like, that needs to be emphasized when he's like, the dumbest things that he said so far in this video have all been about in an area where he should ostensibly have the most expertise.
Yep. And yet?
We know they lived at the same time.
Okay, so the same thing would be with humans.
We're humans, yeah. Just because we don't find humans buried with dinosaurs does not mean they didn't live at the same time, because the fossil record is fickle.
Okay, but again, the reason with the coelacanths and the whales is because they don't actually have the same habitat unless you're being absurdly broad. But that's not true for humans and dinosaurs. Dinosaurs lived in basically every terrestrial environment you can think of, including snowy tundras in Alaska, right? So we have fossils from all of those places. We have fossils of dinosaurs that probably lived in forests, like Psittacosaurus, which we know it probably lived in a forest because we know what its skin markings were like, and its skin markings were countershaded in a way that is ideal for a forested environment. So we have a really good idea that we have forested dinosaurs.
Yeah, I actually did not know that about Psittacosaurus. That's awesome.
Yeah. So there was a Psittacosaurus fossil that was, it was illegally obtained from China. It's currently, there's a process that's ongoing right now to repatriate it to China. But while it was outside of China, it was found that it had extremely good melanosome preservation across what was essentially an entire full body skin impression. Including an impression of the dinosaur's cloaca, which is why now there is a paper about the butthole of Psittacosaurus that you can go read if you want
Dapper, you have no idea. I was about to bring that up. Like, nice. I literally was pulling up the Live Science article about it because I love this article so bad. Like, let me just read you the title and the subtitle of this article if I can.
Go.
First, the title of this article, again, Live Science. These are the science journalists, people. We love them. First preserved dinosaur butthole is, quote, perfect and unique, paleontologist says. And then the subtitle is, this was a multi-purpose hole. Like, come on.
Good job, guys.
Come on.
T-Rex arms or chicken legs, Keller says for $1.99. Did you say skid marks with a poop emoji? I did not. Skin, not skid. But so yeah, because the melanosome preservation was so exact, they could get a very, very, very detailed view of the coloration of Psittacosaurus. And it turns out that the kind of countershading it has, like how abrupt the change is from the light to the dark color and things like that, are most similar to modern animals that live in forests with dappled lighting. Which means Psittacosaurus was probably living in forests too. But we have desert dinosaurs. We have, like I said, tundra dinosaurs. We have dinosaurs who lived in swampy areas. We have dinosaurs who lived in arid plains covered in ferns because grass hadn't evolved. Like, you name the environment, we have dinosaurs from there. And humans tend to really, really like a few different kinds of environments. And while they can be found just about anywhere, the place where you find most humans is like coastal areas. And we have lots of coastal dinosaurs.
Floodplains.
Yeah. The exact places that are perfect for preserving fossils of dinosaurs as well as humans.
Yep.
In fact, I think something like half of the human population lives within like 30 kilometers of the shore.
Wow.
Like, Humans love to live at low elevation near the water. That is their... And the reason is obvious, right? Humans need water, and water is full of food.
I would also say, as someone that has lived within walking distance of a beach before, it's pretty awesome, Dapper.
I mean, look, I'm a desert kind of dinosaur, but I will accept that for a human, that sounds pretty cool.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm an example of one of those dinosaurs from a desert. Ceratosaurus, yeah. Anyway, here we go.
I don't know. Wait, I don't know. Ceratosaurs, I mean, they like their river floodplains too. I'm just gonna put it out there.
Right, but in a in an arid environment. Because rivers exist in arid environments. I don't know if you know this, but it's a thing.
Wait, what?
Yeah, turns out. All right, here we go.
It preserved some things and it didn't preserve other things, even though they were contemporaneous.
Okay, so one of the explanations that some creationists give for why we
It was a weirdly dramatic thing to do. I don't know.
I just watched Rob Carter get rid of that piece of paper one more time because that made me crack up.
Let's see what we can do.
It preserved some things
Nope,
and it didn't
crashed.
preserve other things, even though they were contemporaneous.
I'm so sorry.
Okay, so one of the
Oh, wait, maybe it didn't.
explanations
The video is done. There's no more video. It's only audio now.
I have ruined the stream. I apologize to the audience. I just wanted to see Rob Carter incredibly dramatically flip that paper one time because it was.
Well, we'll see what happens with maybe the video will come back.
that some creationists give for why we do not find human fossils before the flood. They say that humans run to high ground,
Ah, yes. Running to higher ground.
and I understand that. I don't really like the argument.
Roasted T-Rex arms or chicken legs Keller for $4.99 says, and plus living near a coast guarantees you a diet of tasty seagulls. Are there actually human cultures which, like, for whom, like, seagulls are a significant source of calories? Like, is that even a thing? I don't know. It wouldn't shock me if there are people, if there's a culture out there that, like, hunts seagulls. But on the other hand, I've never heard of it.
Any culture that could hunt seagulls would also you'd think would also be able to fish and would generally just have better luck fishing more consistently.
Yeah, that's also probably true. Yeah, like, why would you go after the seagulls when you could go after the easier to catch fish?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I also don't know that I would want to eat a seagull. They eat all sorts of crap. It's like, just trash.
I might eat one purely out of vengeance, but for sustenance, probably not.
Okay. Yeah, like, take that, seagull, you dick. Why just try to steal my ice cream cone at the beach?
Yeah. No, like seagulls have stolen things from me so many times that it's about it. I'm just saying that seagulls, as a group, you have it coming.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna leave it at.
Matthew Gay says, note the time and try a refresh. If we had more than like a half an hour left, I probably would, but we don't, so I'm not going to.
I don't like that argument at all.
Yeah, why is
But I
that?
hear it a lot. Well, have you ever been outside during a torrential rainstorm?
Occasionally, but seldom because the moment it starts to rain,
You go inside.
I hide in my house.
Fleeing to high ground would also presuppose that you thought a giant flood was coming.
Yes.
And unless you were Noah and his family, you probably didn't believe that there was a big flood coming.
So, I actually very rarely go to the human example for the fleeing to higher ground explanation, because it's also something that gets talked about when it comes to, like, it's talked about in conjunction with ecological zonation, right? Like, why are birds found so high up? It's like, well, because they flew up. Which, okay, that, I mean, it seems reasonable. But then you have questions like, okay, well, what about pterosaurs? What is it about Dimorphodon that had it so bad at flying up? Because if you can fly at all, basically the whole point of flying is that you can change your elevation easily. Like, that's basically what flying is the ability to easily change your elevation. So why did Dimorphodon get buried so low?
Yeah, like all the other flying insects, the flying like pterosaurs. There's lots of other flying things. So I mean, they don't really have an explanation for that other than to say, oh well, maybe birds are less dense than pterosaurs used to be.
Which, by the way, we know that that's not true. If anything, pterosaurs were probably less dense than birds.
Yeah,
pterosaurs actually. I mean, here's one thing you got to remember. Pterosaurs have had a lot more time to evolve adaptations to flight than birds have had so far. Pterosaurs existed for a much longer time than birds have yet. And they had extreme adaptations to lightning themselves. they were mostly air, and some of their bones, some of their long bones, were so thin that like they were described as paper thin because they're basically just structural support for more air sacs and muscle attachment sites, and that's it, right?
Yeah, pterosaurs are like, yeah, which is one of my favorite groups. And like, I just wish, yeah, I could go on pterosaurs all day and geek out about it, like and everything, but maybe at a different point. The main question that I always have about, like, because ecological zonation is brought up a lot as an
Mhm.
explanation for like the fossil order that we have. My question is always like, can you point to a single example of a large flood today that has created these stratigraphic layers that are ecologically zonated, like you're saying? Because if floods are capable of doing this, then massive floods like the one in the Channel Scablands should be reproducing these ecologically zonated stratigraphic layers, and they're not.
Right. In fact, what actually tends to happen is that organismal remains that are, swept up in a flood tend to get jumbled with all of the ecological zones from across the entire extent of the flood, all just dumped into one deposit.
Literally exactly what happens. It's like a total mix up. Like there's no neatly ordered layers according to species type. That's
Right.
what we definitely never ever see in flood deposits.
Mm-hmm. And it's not like we don't know. Like, we have flood deposits. They're there.
There are real flood geologists who study real actual floods that happen.
Right.
Tell you what those flood deposits look like.
Imagine studying the actual geology of actual floods. What a concept.
Right?
All right, here we go.
I think that's why when you have big localized floods, people get stranded in the houses all the time. Right?
Yeah, there was a big flood right here in this area. When I first moved to this area, we lived in my house for a month, and we had 30 days.
I don't know what this area is. Do you know?
Where Rob Carter's from?
Yeah.
I'll look it up real quick while we listen.
Of rain every day, and on the last day, I think we had 10 or 11 inches of rain. And a little creek behind my house that was maybe a half a foot deep, all of a sudden was 20 feet deep, 100 feet wide, and was flowing at about 10 or 15 miles an hour.
Oh, wow.
There's no way a
Apparently, Atlanta.
Okay.
human could cross that little creek.
And this was quite a while ago.
Well, 10 years ago, maybe?
Oh, just 10 years ago.
But right now it is actually starting to bug me.
Oh, that not being able to see them?
Yeah. We're gonna see if...
I know. I'm so sorry,
No.
Dapper. You never have listened to me, honestly.
I'm just gonna launch it again. It'll be fine.
Okay.
It'll be fine.
Yeah.
Let's see.
You should just never listen to me again.
Deal. All right, we were at 744. Oh, and he actually showed a map of Georgia, so I guess that makes sense. All right, I'll just share that with you.
Because of torrential rains.
Cool.
And you were stranded.
And we were stranded. On our street, there was 4 ways to get off of the street, and 3 of those ways were either underwater or the bridge had been washed out. So we were almost trapped.
Uh-huh.
And if my house was right next to this little creek and it was in danger of being washed away. But if my house started getting inundated, I would have grabbed my wife and kids and we would have fled to higher ground.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Josh McGee's for $5 says, need to duck out early from this one due to prior plans. Good day, all. Well, good day to you too, and I hope your prior plans go well. Thank you so much for being so generous, Josh McGee's. You are very frequently here to help support and gift some memberships, and I really do appreciate that. It does mean a lot. And I don't think that Bent is going to get any free pizza today. So I think we would need to get somewhere around like 109 or 10%, and we're at 40%, so probably not going to get. Oh well. Bent will just have to eat, like, I don't know, food he paid for himself.
Sad day.
I know.
Which is 100 feet away. We wouldn't have been able to say, hey, we need to fly to the North Georgia mountains. And if we thought that, we never would have been able to get there.
Ah, it's interesting.
So flee to higher ground means a local topological high point, not a global topological high point.
And the thing is, I largely agree with Rob Carter, which is why we're going to take a drink for, like, getting something right here, right? Like, yeah,
I love how, like, Rob Carter is just treating these ideas with, like, very thinly veiled contempt and ridicule.
Yeah.
Like, he clearly thinks that, like, these are stupid things to think, and that you like people are stupid for thinking them. But he can't say that. But he's like, the way that he's explaining this is like so patronizing to like, he's just like explaining like very simple concepts.
Right.
Like, it's just, oh man, he just thinks so low of the CMI's audience. You can
An-
tell.
Annoying all-purpose orifice letters says, cut Bent into your endless rice supply. Bent has been cut into that rice supply the whole time. There has never been a time where he was not in on the rice supply. So I guess if all he wants is rice, then yeah, he can get some free rice that he didn't pay for himself. I suspect that he might want, like protein and maybe vegetables or something to go along with that. I don't want to eat just rice. That sounds kind of...
Nutrition is overrated. I've always said that.
Yes, that is a well-known fact. I'm not a doctor. Don't take any medical advice from me.
Humans
Only the
cannot.
financial.
No, don't take financial advice either. The closest I ever come to financial advice is, hey, don't give me money if you can't afford it. And I think I'm legally okay if I say, don't give me money if you can't afford it. I think that's on the okay side of the law.
I would also give the financial advice, do not donate to CMI. But
I don't know if that's even financial advice. That's just like, don't give these guys money. They don't deserve it.
I think that is solid financial advice.
Let's see. Roach in a T-Rex arms or chicken legs Keller for $6.66 says, I wonder if Grayson was aware that videos don't progress as far because cool people keep super chatting to hijack the stream with an AIG is a bag of dicks emoji in there. I mean, there is some of that. Like, the degree to which people super chat is sometimes inversely proportional to how cool the video actually is. But we're going to take a drink for that AIG is a bag of dicks. All right, here we go.
Not migrate over vast different distances during a massive flood.
So what is this idea about fleeing to high ground? Why would fleeing to high ground actually not result in fossils? What's the rationale behind that?
Well, it's really an older argument. And the idea is that because you're smart and you're intelligent, unlike an animal, which is dumb, right? They're just going to die. Humans are going to be like, oh, I'm going to walk uphill.
Yes.
If you're the last thing buried, maybe you wouldn't be petrified as well as the first things buried.
Ah, okay.
I think that's where the argument comes from. But neither
Doesn't
you nor
really
I
work.
really like
Yes,
this very
that's
much
right.
because practically it just doesn't work.
I mean, maybe it could work if everyone fled to the top of the mountains, but like we said earlier, humans love to settle near the coast. So, like, it's not clear that even if there were a tsunami, you would have time to even get to a mountain. Never mind, climb the mountain. So I'm not disagreeing with Robert Carter here. This doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
You're falling victim to your uniformitarian assumptions because you're assuming that the pre-flood humans liked to live in the same place that us modern humans like to live.
Right.
But pre-flood, actually, all the humans like to live exclusively in caves at the top of mountains.
Where it's really hard to get food and water.
Yeah, and that's all in the Bible.
Yeah, it's right in there in Genesis 1.53.
Yeah,
right there.
Yeah,
right there.
Roche, baby.
Roche in a T-Rex arms or chicken legs. Keller just gifted 5 Dapper Dinosaur memberships. Thank you so much. Here's 1, 2, 3, and then it's time to pour another mojito. Which, yeah, they're in a can. I'm lazy. What can I say? You know what? As far as canned cocktails go, it's not too bad. I do wish there were actual mint leaves floating in here. But alas, there are not. I should just get some mint. Although mint takes over a garden if you're not careful. Mint is basically a weed.
I was about to ask you about if you have mint in your garden.
No. Here's 4. And Savage Bivalve Alpinist Cobra for $4.99 says, animals are pretty smart. I've never met a dog that believed in a global flood. You know what? I'll ask the dogs here if they believe in a global flood later. I'm sure that they will not say yes.
There's another argument people used to use. Some people still do. I'm not a big fan of it. It's called the float and bloat.
What's that?
Well, if when humans die, they float, and therefore they don't get buried in sedimentary rocks.
Okay, yes.
But that's not quite true.
Why is that?
Because human bodies sink. This is why we drown.
But don't we read about people who...
Okay, first of all, that's not why people drown.
I know.
Jeez, I'm taking a drink for that. What? Okay. a living human body, most living humans are less dense than water overall and therefore float. If you just jump into a pool, hold your breath, you're not going to sink to the bottom of the pool unless you are significantly more dense than average. There are some people who will sink. Like they're out there, right? Like if you have you're very, very lean, you have a lot of muscle mass, and muscles tend to be a lot denser.
Held as much air out of your lungs as you can.
Sure. In those cases, maybe you'll sink. But if you have a lungs full of air, and you were not like, bodybuilder levels of lean, if you've got a little bit of fat on you, especially if you have prominent breasts, yeah, you'll probably float more easily because most people don't get rid of all that fat.
If you have a high body fat, you'll float more likely. But if you're drowned and your lungs are full of water,
then
you will initially sink. But then once the bacteria, once bacteria start to decompose your body, they'll be releasing gases, and then you will float. And then once your decomposition has gone through after a couple of days or to weeks, depending on your exact composition and fat and all that, then you will sink again. So you float and then sink.
Right. And also, significantly, people don't generally drown because they sink. They mostly drown because they're having trouble keeping just their head above the water for various reasons. So you could be floating, and if your head is not staying above the water often enough, you could be inhaling too much water, and you could then drown.
Or you could drown in an amount of water that is not high enough to sink.
Right.
Like 6 inches.
Yep. As long as it's enough water that your nose and mouth can both be covered, you can drown in it. Which,
you sink because you have drowned, not you drown because you sink.
Now, if you were to sink and not have a way back up, I'm sure that would result in you drowning, but that's not what typically happens, right? Like if someone throws you overboard from a ship with like an anchor tied around your ankles, yeah, you're going to sink and drown. But that's not normally how people drown when they drown. That's sort of a murder thing rather than an accidental death thing, which,
Well, hey, God did technically murder all those people in the flood. So.
But I don't think it was by, literally putting heavy things around their ankles.
It could have been miracle murders. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I guess technically it was a miracle murder the whole way through.
Yeah.
Drown in the river and then the body floats up after a few days.
Yeah, exactly. After a few days, as decompositional gases start building up in the body cavity, the body can float.
Yes.
And it'll float for a while, but then when the gases burst open the abdominal cavity, and they sink again.
Okay, that was a sound effect I didn't really need to hear when talking about bloating corpses. Thanks, Rob. Thanks.
Have you ever heard Rob make a sound like that before?
No, that's a new one for me. I kind of wish I hadn't heard it, but okay.
I've never seen this man cut loose this much and be this much of a. Well done, Rob. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you.
Good job, Rob. Sure.
He's
so they don't last a long time on the surface. Obese people with a lot of fat, they can float when they're dead.
Yeah, but their bones won't. They're going to be eaten by scavengers pretty quickly. Like whales have a much higher body fat content than, say, most, even obese humans, right? Whales are hugely, there's a huge portion of their body that's made of fat. They still sink.
Yep. Whale bones are some of the densest bones, in the entire history of life on Earth, too.
Take that, everybody else, especially pterosaurs. Let's see. Rochna, T-Rex arms or chicken legs. Keller for $4.99 says, Dapper giving directions on how to kill the fragile human race. Hey, man, it's time for the dinosaurs to take back over. You humans have had an interesting run, but it's over. Let's go.
I'd also like to point out that, Rob Carter also knows a lot about this subject, about dead bodies, so...
Hey, you know what? Maybe he's got an interest in forensic science, which is okay. That's fine. Rob, that's okay.
Most people don't. And even if they do, they don't last long. And if you're on the bottom and if your body's being attacked by any sort of a crab or a fish or something that's a consumer, it's going to poke holes in that body cavity and the body's not going to float.
He's right. Sanguine Luca Descendant Sonder for $5 says, aren't there mutations that make your muscles and bones so dense that you can't swim? AIG's bag of dicks. Also, drowning IRL doesn't look like the movies. Sorry, it doesn't look like the movies. That is correct. Drowning people don't generally scream for help or flail around. It's actually, if you rely on movie depictions of drowning, you will miss when people are drowning. We'll take a drink for the AIG's a bag of dicks. As far as are there mutations that make your muscles and bones so dense that you can't swim, it seems plausible that there would be such mutations, but I am also not aware of them. But that doesn't mean they don't exist. So my answer would be like, probably, but I'm not aware of them. And also, most people wouldn't have those mutations. There is that. And of course, Trippy Liquid says, we're all destined to be crabs. I mean, carcinization is a pretty prominent trend, but it also only seems to apply to decapods. So, like...
Yeah, one interesting thing, we talked about horseshoe crabs earlier. Horseshoe crabs actually more closely related to spiders than to crabs.
It's true. By a lot, actually.
Yeah. But by a lot, yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know, horseshoe crabs are kind of defying the crabization trend.
I mean, I guess depending on how exact you're being, maybe you could say that they're a carcinized, like, chelicerate, I guess, if you wanted to. But I wouldn't. I wouldn't want to.
I wouldn't either. They're not that crab-like to me, to be honest.
Yeah, the problem for me, the big problem is that they don't have like the manipulatory arms that crabs as well as false crabs tend to have. Because one of the weird things about horseshoe crabs is that their limbs are extremely basal. They're basically like their limbs look a whole lot like the limbs of the first ever chelicerates. And even their mouth parts, like their actual chelicerae, look barely distinguishable from their legs. If you didn't know what you were looking at, and you had like a severed like horseshoe crab chelicera and the leg of a smaller horseshoe crab, you would be hard-pressed to find significant differences between them that could make you easily say, well, this is a mouth part, and this is just a leg. So,
wow, you know, that's how you can really tell that there was an intelligent designer behind that.
Having mouth parts that barely are distinguishable from legs?
Yeah, that was a really intelligent design.
I mean, it seems to be working for the horseshoe crabs, to be fair.
Yeah.
They're doing okay. Although humans keep harvesting their blood like weird vampires.
Well, it's blue. I mean, it's so cool. Even though
it is.
We have a synthetic alternative now, I think, right?
Well, good, because so initially the idea was supposed to be like you harvest not a whole lot of the hemolymph, which it's not technically blood, but whatever. So you harvest a small amount of the hemolymph and you release the horseshoe crabs back. And the idea was supposed to be that, well, we're harvesting such a small amount that we don't think this is going to have any significant effect on the horseshoe crabs long term. But more recently, there were studies that were like, it looks like they actually have a significantly lower survivability after harvesting than they would if they hadn't been harvested for their blood. So, like, we actually are negatively affecting the horseshoe crab population by harvesting them for blood.
I had heard that just like recently, like a couple years ago, that they got a synthetic version that's cheaper to manufacture, and so I think that should be good news for the horseshoe crab community.
Yeah, well, it's also good news for just humans generally, because the thing that you want to use horseshoe blood for is a lot of it's stuff like diagnostic stuff. Like, do you have a bacterial infection? Do you take the sample from whatever human you're trying to diagnose and you put some horseshoe crab blood on it? And if the horseshoe blood congeals around certain spots, that's probably a bacterial infection, because the way that horseshoe crabs fight off infection is various proteins in their blood actually just mechanically glom on to foreign cells and just make it so that they precipitate out and can't then go on to infect the rest of the creature.
Wow, this is a crazy coincidence right now. I just looked it up to make sure about what I was talking about with the synthetic alternative. This article was published in Nature magazine like 4 days ago on September 10th. It says, the title is, "The Pharmaceutical Industry Must Embrace Synthetic Alternative to Horseshoe Crab Blood." Like 4 days ago in Nature.
Also, Savage Bivalve Alpinist Cobra for $4.99 says, Zephyctinus swim less well than Glyptodonts. It's the only explanation. Yeah, Glyptodonts are famously wonderful swimmers. You know, that big, heavy armor shell. Very, very hydrodynamic. Yeah, also the fact that their heads are lower than the majority of their body mass definitely lends them to, very, very effective aquatic motion. Actually, I'm not sure if Glyptodonts even could swim.
Like, if you put one of those in the water, how would they keep their head out of the water? It's not clear to me.
Huh.
Seems.
Yeah, I became a little bit of a, deep water situation there.
I mean, they must have been. They almost certainly had some ability to move through water, because basically all mammals do. But like, yeah, I feel like they might be some of the weakest swimmers among mammals. In case anyone doesn't know, glyptodonts were basically armadillo relatives that were gigantic, and were basically the answer to what happens if a mammal tries to be an ankylosaur. Is basically what a glyptodon is. We're gonna get a little bit more.
If you've ever seen Ice Age, like they're in the movie Ice Age.
Okay, it's been a very long time since I've seen Ice Age, so I don't remember. I do remember that like they just smashed together a bunch of like Cenozoic animals that were not actually alive at the same time or place.
Exactly.
So yeah, my unfinished journey, who's been a member for 18 months and is at the amniote level, says, "Is it just me, or is Rob Carter's voice vaguely reminiscent of the Circle Face's voice? Hail Nero, Daps, etc." Well, first of all, thank you very much. I think he might have some similar like intonation patterns to Circle Face, which, by the way, in case you're not aware, Circle Face is the host of a Christian podcast that does some young Earth creationist stuff. That we looked at one episode that had Charles Jackson on, and the reason we call him Circle Face is because his face is the shape of a circle.
I know Charles Jackson. I don't know Circle Face, so I'm gonna have to look him up after this.
Yeah. He does like a great NPR voice, and his face is shaped like a circle. So, which it just is. It's a surprisingly circular human face. It kind of reminds me of like a flanged male orangutan, right? Whereas this just it's a circle. It's very round.
Earlier, when you were talking about in the hypothetical scenario where your grandfather's skull ends up in a museum again, I was like, why would they want Dapper's grandpa's skull? But now I'm like, the way you're describing Circle Face, like I think maybe like we should ask his consent. Skull.
Hey, Circle Face, can we get your skull in the Smithsonian after you're dead?
It's perfectly circular.
Yeah,
it needs to be studied by science.
Just leave it to the Smithsonian, and then when you die of natural causes, we're totally not going to kill you. Your skull will just go to them.
You know what? I think. Okay, the Smithsonian, their exception should be nullified. But I do think that maybe Circle Face's skull should count as an artifact.
Well, I mean, even with the law saying that human remains are human remains, you can still find legal ways to display human remains in museums. It's just that you actually have to get permission from the people who would otherwise have control over those human remains, and there are like, there are rules you have to follow, but it's not impossible to display human remains. Like, you ever see those exhibits where like people have donated their bodies and they were like sort of like suffused with this resiny plastic stuff, and like those are real human remains. You're allowed to display them because those people actually put in their will that they're donating their body to this for this use, and so now they're allowed to be used for this. So there are ways to get around the problems of human remains being displayed in museums. It's just that you actually have to, take into account the wishes of the person if they're ascertainable, as well as their next of kin, especially if you can't ask the person themselves.
Are you trying to say like humans have rights or something?
Yeah, generally speaking, as a broad rule, humans do in fact have rights.
Oh, dang! All right.
I know it's very inconvenient for a lot of different purposes, and yet it remains the way things are.
I would just think that human rights are especially inconvenient for a dinosaur.
I mean, it is a whole lot harder to go hunting when the most common and widespread primate on the entire planet is completely off limit.
Darn.
Yeah, it is very inconvenient.
Dapper, what is your diet consisted of?
So I don't get to hunt a lot because it's usually not hunting season, which means I usually just have to go to the grocery store and buy like packaged meat. Yeah.
Wow, that has to be really expensive. I mean, I know that the Tiger King was running through $3 million a year just to buy the amount of meat that he needed to sustain the tigers in his zoo.
And he was getting waste meat.
That $3 million was even him cutting corners by supplementing it with roadkill whenever he could.
Yep.
So like for a fully grown adult dinosaur, I mean, at the grocery store, let's just say, let's keep those super chats coming, people, because the dino need to eat.
It's true. Yeah. In fact, when I buy a Benthoven of pizza, I usually get one myself, and it's just covered in meat.
Yeah, real carnivore diet.
Yeah.
Carnivore pizza.
I mean, I'm a Ceratosaurus. I don't have a whole lot of choice. All right, we're gonna get a little bit more. We're gonna get a little bit more Rob Carter in, but then we're gonna wrap things up pretty soon.
I'm going to sink to the bottom.
Yeah, just like the whale that they just found off of California last week. It was an intact whale lying on the bottom of the ocean.
Which is interesting because a lot of people think that when whales die, they float to the top.
No, they don't. Sometimes they can.
Okay.
A decomposing, nasty, stinky whale can have enough gases in it and maybe enough fat in it that it'll float.
So, okay, whales that die usually float for a little bit, and then what also ends up happening is a lot of things like bits of blubber get separated, washed ashore, and become what's known as a globster, which is a portmanteau of glob and monster.
I love that, and that I did not know that, and I'm so happy that now I know that.
Yeah, so if you look up globster, it's usually what ends up happening is something washes ashore. It smells awful, people have trouble identifying it, and they think that maybe it's some kind of unknown sea organism that's washed up like a weird unknown jellyfish or squid or something. Then a scientist comes along, takes a sample, sends it to a genetics lab, and it's a whale. And like, yeah, it's just a whale blubber and skin, guys. Sorry. That's it.
That's it. That's so fun, because I've seen like some unidentifiable things at the beach before. I mean, but globsters, that's a great word.
It is a really good word. I really like the word globster. It's a lot of fun.
My main issue with this whole float and bloat thing is that it affects like everything. Animal, not humans. Like, there's nothing that would like, this is not an explanation for the lack of human fossils specifically, like at all. There's nothing. Humans are not preferentially bloating and floating more than any other animal.
Right. And to be fair to Robert Carter, he's also probably going to come up with probably broadly similar reasons as to why this doesn't work. And no, that's
he won't.
Oh, he won't.
His reasons are just that like humans don't bloat. They don't float. That's his answer.
I mean, he's broadly correct about that. But yeah, the thing is, if you want to explain why there are no humans, but there are other things, you need to come up with an explanation as to why humans are different from the other things that we do find. So, like, why do we find, like, Camarasaurus, but not Homo sapiens? What is the difference between Camarasaurus that means that we find multiple specimens of Camarasaurus, but we don't find any specimens of Homo sapiens? Why is that? Or I'll say Homo, right?
I'm curious now, because I don't think that we're going to actually be able to make it to the video where Rob Carter actually tries to solve that issue. So explaining why it's a problem and why all the other creations failed and the answers are stupid. So far, that's all we've heard, and it's been great. Yeah. But like, Rob Carter is going to offer his solution. So I want to ask now, get into.
Oh, you just cut out a little bit.
Do you have a prediction for what his solution is going to be, Dad?
I think his solution is just going to be that humans are rare.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't want to say whether or not you got it right, but from my reaction, you could probably guess.
Yeah, I think that is just going to be his. There just aren't lots of humans. I don't know if that's accurate.
We have to build up the suspense for if we do a part 2 for this. We have to build it up like we don't know what his going to be.
Well, I would like to do a part 2. I'm currently thinking that what I might want to try to do is to have Vishanti back for the Pete Greer video next week, and then maybe the week after, if you want, Grayson, we can pop back in, because we're just barely past the halfway point on this video right now.
And Rob Carter's literally doing his best, like, dinosaur impression.
Yeah, I do appreciate that. I feel represented, Rob. All right, guys, so let's start wrapping things up. Again, Grayson has his channel listed in the description. It's the first thing. It says featuring at, I think it's Base Theory, which is the tag for his channel, even though the name has changed to Grayson Hawk. Please go check out Grayson's channel. Also, the link to his debate about where this topic comes up is right after that. Also, below that is the link to the first episode of the Star Trek Lexington Let's Play, or actual play, whatever you want to call it. So please check that out on Friday. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Also, you don't have to give super chats, because you literally can't, because that channel isn't monetized. So don't worry about it. It's free. We have a $5 super chat from Heather Schrodinger's Fossil Coon for well, I said $5. Not all whales float when they die. Right whales are among the ones that do. It's one of the reasons why they're called right whales. Yes, I mean, there is that certain whales are more likely to float than others. Although I suspect that any of them that have reasonably intact body cavity would probably float after a little while. But again, I'm not exactly like a whale forensic scientist or something. So Grayson, what do you have coming up on your channel or on other channels that features you that you want to let people know about?
Yeah, so I actually I mentioned a little bit earlier that I went to Dinosaur Adventureland to debate Kent Hovind. So that's kind of like I have been as part of this channel. I mean, my channel basically is mostly science communication and pseudoscience debating and debunking. But I do travel for it as well. Like this last summer, I went on a dinosaur fossil hunting expedition. We were actually like looking for ceratosaurs and pod 2 in Wyoming. And I'm just this last week or 2 weeks ago, I went to a faith healing that was traveling around the country that was promising supernatural miracles and healing was going to occur. Blind would see, disabled would walk. So I went there undercover to observe if I could. So that's the next video that's going to be coming.
Grayson, you're cutting out a little bit. Is your connection good?
It should be. I see. I don't know what would be causing that.
Okay.
Is it still happening?
Not currently.
Okay. Well, basically, I have a video on faith healing where I went to go witness miracles myself because creationists are always telling me that my mind is closed and that I'm just not open to supernatural things. So I went to go experience it myself. I won't spoil anything, but no miracles happen. So
No.
And then I'm going to be starting a new kind of stream at the end of this month where I will be taking in calls from viewers, creationists, anybody that wants to debate science, or talk about something cool, or keep the stream entertained. We're going to be taking in calls from the audience while I am outside picking up trash somewhere outdoors. I'm going to be picking up trash while taking up these calls. There's going to be a co-host that's dealing with super chats and the callers and everything. And yeah, I'm very excited to be starting up this format. It's going to be called Trash Talk. So look out for Trash Talk episode 1 sometime at the end of this.
Okay. So let's see what's coming up here on Tuesday. Matt with Maddie is going to be happening. I have confirmed with Maddie earlier today that she is still good for that. That will be at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. So we're going to continue on looking at Matt Powell, which is just great. Then on Thursday, Getting Catfish While Radiometric Dating, Andrew Snelling is Still a Liar, Part 1 is coming out. So yeah, it turns out that Andrew Snelling remains a dishonest hack. And
I do want to say that is a fantastic title.
Yes, thank you very much. I do appreciate it. Yeah, so Getting Catfish While Radiometric Dating, that'll be on Thursday at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. And then on Saturday, I'm currently planning to invite Vishanti back on. I believe she'll be around. So the plan right now is to go back to the Pete Greer video with Vishanti. And then I'm thinking that maybe a week after that, maybe Grayson can come back if he's available. So looks like he is.
Yep, that's great.
So yeah, the next Dapper Reacts will be, exactly a week from today. So that'll be at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. And also on Friday at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern on Top Hats Off, my second channel. Please come by and say hi to me as well as the rest of the crew of the Lexington, because we are going to be doing Star Trek Lexington. I have all sorts of art assets, audio files, opening credits, end credits, all sorts of stuff already set up. We've got character art, all sorts of great stuff. I'm planning to put on my human suit. I'm gonna shove myself into my stupid itchy human suit. On top of that, put a Starfleet uniform, and then put myself on camera in my human suit just for you guys for Star Trek Adventures. So please do show up for that. I think it's going to be a good time. But with that, if you are interested and you have access to my supporters only Discord server, I'm going to head over there and we're going to watch some Power Rangers Operation Overdrive. So if that interests you, head over there. Otherwise, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your weekend. Stay safe out there, and I hope to see all of you on Tuesday. Bye, everybody.
Before you go, I'd like to just take a second to thank my channel members and patrons, especially those pledging $20 or above. Benthoven, Philrevara, Tapioca Weasel, Whispers, Ellerhon Teller, Horseflesh, Ian Chen, Kelvin Brostick Van Manen, Landon Knoll, Mabdy Babdy, Sphincter of Doom, Vollus, North Texas Fossils, John Ackerman, Strawberry Vein, and Dr. Tapioca Weasel. It's because of my channel members and patrons that I'm able to do this show as I am now with 3 videos a week. Without them, I would be reduced to maybe 1 a week, or maybe even 1 every other week. So, if you like this channel and you'd like to support, there's a link to the Patreon in the description, and a join button below this video. All channel members and patrons get early access to videos, often many months in advance, as well as access to my super secret Discord server that's just for supporters and is a great way to contact me. Thanks for watching.